Nine.
29? Isn't that what Schmidt says when he's turning 29?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't watched the episode. I was thinking 9 from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I go 9. Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
We're discussing chapter 29 this week, Kennit's Women, which don't like the chapter name already.
No, it already primes me for the rage I'm about to feel all chapter. Well,
Yeah.
most of the chapter, because some of the chapters in the serpent's point of view, so.
Wow. For once, you're like, serpents.
I'm like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we're in the serpent's point of view right now. We're in Shriver's point of view. And Shriver is kind of hoping for a change. She's hoping that that Malkin and She Who Remembers might argue instead of endlessly discussing what is going on, because then that would mean that there was a decision being made. But right now, they're just kind of in limbo, trailing behind the two leading serpents and the silver provider, the Liveship still, this bolt. And they're stuck in kind of a suspended form of suspended state. They don't know where they're going. They're just following their leaders. They're losing serpents. They're losing mass and weight and the will and strength to move on because they are late in cocooning.
Yeah, so I think this is really interesting because we know that what brought them on this journey in the first place, what started at the beginning of the books, is that they felt the primal need to go to the cocooning grounds. Like something about their biology told them it's time to cocoon, and they have been searching ever since. And interestingly to me, because it's been 2 years since this series started in book, and they are just now starting to feel like they're missing something. So obviously this is supposed to be a long journey anyway, but 2 years in, they're feeling like time is slipping away. They're missing out. Something is wrong.
Yeah. And Shriver is talking to Caesarea here, saying that, we're following the ship, but to what end? Nothing is happening. They're wasting their toxins on this ship. By the time a decision is reached, I'm going to be too weak to travel with the Tangle. What does Malkin wait for?
Repeatedly, they've told us we must be patient. I have patience, but I do not have the endurance.
Yeah. Caesarea is silent for a while and then is kind of amazed. It's like, I never thought to hear you criticize Malkin. We have followed him long, and I have never questioned his wisdom. I wish he would lead us again. Him I would follow until my flesh could no longer hold my bones together. Now, however, he defers both to She Who Remembers and to the silver ship. I accept the wisdom of She Who Remembers, but who is the silver creature that we should tarry to do her bidding while our cocooning season escapes us? Not who is the silver creature, what? Malkin materialized beside them and kind of wraps them up, and Shriver goes limp, thankful that someone else is supporting her because she is growing really weak.
Well, no, specifically grateful that Malkin is holding her because his embrace or whatever helped her relax more thoroughly.
And so Malkin kind of speaks on and says, like, no, you've not doubted me, even when I have, just dithered back and forth. And you've paid the price for that, I know. I fear that the price we all pay for my indecision is too high. She Who Remembers has already pointed this out to me. Our Tangle is mostly male. It will do little good for us to cocoon and hatch if we have delayed so long that no queens rise. Delayed? Shriver asked quietly. That is what we debate. Every tide of lingering weakens us, yet without a guide there is no sense in forging on, for this world does not match our memories. Not even She Who Remembers is sure of the way. We need Bolt's guidance, so we must wait for her. As weak as we have become, we will need her protection as well.
So before we go forward, I just want to back up a little bit because in Malkin's little talk about the bad things happening right now, he does say that the tangle is mostly male, which means there won't be very many queens to arise, which does confirm at least that Robin Hobb has written that these creatures stay the sex that they are.
Yeah.
And like they're from the egg to dragon and everything in between, they all stay the same sex, which I think is really interesting. Still don't know about like being reborn as a different gender, but
at least from serpent to dragon, they remain the same.
Yeah. So whenever we go to the next trilogy with the dragons in it, that means that all the queen dragons are have to be some of the female.
Yes, serpents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Caesarea basically just blunt, straight out asks, why does she make us wait then? To that, Malkin replies, she has given us a score of answers and none. She who remembers thinks the silver ship is more dependent on the fickle aid of humans than she will admit. As I told you, it comes down to what she is. She insists she is a dragon. We know she is not. She is not? Caesarea thundered in dismay. What is she then? Why does that matter? Shriver moaned. Why cannot she simply help us as she said she would? Malkin spoke soothingly, but his words were alarming. To help us, she will have to beg help of the humans. While she insists she is a dragon, I do not think she can humble herself to do that. He spoke slowly. Before she can help us, she must accept what she is. She who remembers has been urging her to do that. She who remembers knows much of one two legs aboard her ship. Wintrow aided her to escape the others. In touching him, she knew him. He was full of knowledge of a ship, thoughts that she who remembered did not fully grasp at the time. Now, she begins to piece it all together. We seek to awaken the other portion of the ship, to give her strength to emerge again. It is a slow process, and she has been both weak and reluctant, but of late she has begun to stir. That's Vivacia.
Right. Just a quick little addendum. At least in my copy, it says the Wintrow. Wintrow is lowercase.
Oh, it does not say that. So the way that it says it in my book is, she who remembers has been urging her to do that. She who remembers knows much of one two legs aboard the ship, period. Wintrow, capitalized, aided her to escape the others.
Okay, so first sentence, same. And then, so like one two legs aboard the ship, period. The lowercase Wintrow aided her to escape the others.
Weird.
Yeah. I just thought that was like such a weird detail of like the Wintrow. Like they don't understand names, even though they're dragons or serpents. They all have names, but
yeah,
I don't know.
No, that's a weird change.
Yeah.
They fully know it's a two legs aboard though.
Yes.
On my copy at least.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what the serpents are trying to do. They are trying to awaken Vivacia. So Vivacia's humanity can help the serpents go to the cocooning grounds, because as Bolt is a dragon and insists that she is a dragon, she's not going to humble herself and ask for help to go up the cocooning grounds. And then we switch over to Kennit's point of view. It's been a couple days since he was with Althea Vestrit last, and since that, a night and a day, I should say. So one night and then the whole next day. This is the next evening-ish.
Right.
And he has spent the time, as we left him last time we were with him, away from Wintrow and Etta, just away from the figurehead. And a lot of that time was spent up in the crow's nest. Sorkor had presented him with a peg leg that had a notch so he could climb the rigging. And so he's spent a lot of the time away from everybody, savoring that experience and waiting to come back, because anticipation is all the more sweet.
And just as a recap, the last time we were with Kennit was the chapter where everything went down. So he is really proud of himself and happy with the outcome of that, and is really just reveling in the moment. He doesn't even remember what he's been doing in the time since it's happened. He just knows he was avoiding everyone.
Mm-hmm. Now he stood outside her door, shivering with longing. Would he take her again? He had not yet decided. If she was wakeful enough to accuse him, he intended to deny everything. He would be so gracious, so concerned for her fears. There was such power in controlling another's reality. Never before had he realized that. Such a terrible nightmare, he whispered in sham sympathy, and felt the creeping grin that threatened to overpower his face. So he calms himself and then opens up the door. But that right there, there is such power in controlling another's reality is what really makes him Ygritte again.
Right.
That's kind of that joy that he felt in that last chapter that the charm condemned him for.
Right. And it's not just about the act itself, it's about the total, complete control around the act itself as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because he's not just getting joy out of what he did, he's getting joy out of the fact that he's going to get away with it. He can gaslight her into thinking nothing happened. It's all in her head.
Right.
Like he can really do whatever he wants. He's really feeling invincible in this moment.
So he walks in and he wrinkles his nose because it smells pretty bad. And Althea, if you remember in that last chapter, had thrown up after she fell out of her bunk because Vivacia helped her live again.
Right.
And so he's smelling that. And he's like, this is very unappealing. This won't do. It ruined everything. He's going to have to dose her extra hard and have somebody come in and clean. Bitterly disappointed, he set the tray down on the table. Her full weight hit him between the shoulders. So she was kind of lying in bed. It looked like she had been passed out, and he's very disappointed. He turns his attention away from her, and then he realizes that she had been faking that whole time, waiting for him to come in.
Right. And when she slams into him, he hits his head on the side of the table.
Mm-hmm.
So he has been hurt, but she's putting up a big fight to attack him right now. And he thinks about how if he had both legs, he would be able to overpower her really easily. But right now he's off balance and she kind of has the advantage with the surprise attack. And so he's barely managing to get her off of him.
Yeah. Her reflexes were slow, dulled by the drugs. But as it was, he managed to, if he had two legs, it would have been easy. But as it was, he did manage to grip her wrist for an instant before she jerked away from him. So then they separate a little bit, and her eyes were wide and black. His crutch had fallen out of reach, and he edged towards it. She is yelling at him, saying, you heartless beast, you bastard. And he's feigning bewilderment. He's sticking to his plan before. He's just like, what has come over you?
Right.
What's going on? And she makes her accusation, shouting it out loud. You raped me, you killed my crew, and burned my ship. You killed Brashen, you imprisoned Vivacia. It's all your doing. You make no sense. My dear, your mind is unsettled. Calm down. You don't want to shame yourself before the whole crew, do you? And he's watching her as he's doing this and seeing her glance about for a weapon. And he's like, okay, I did underestimate how dangerous she could be.
Also, I think he's a little surprised because, up until this moment, he was able to sort of coerce her into behaving, quote unquote, by mentioning decorum, right? Like by playing on that society's rules, expectations of,
that social contract that you have when you meet somebody who was raised in that same social contract. It's play nice, use your manners, all of that sort of thing.
Right. And before what happened last chapter with him, he was sort of crossing boundary lines, but only in a way that was easy to dismiss. So it made her feel like she was a bad person for bringing up. Mm-hmm. So he's trying to get back into that space of hey, you don't want to look bad in front of the crew, do you? You're kind of being crazy, but it's gone too far. And so
he broke that contract.
Yeah.
And her throwing up probably helped remove some of the immediate effects of some of the drugs, too.
But we also know that she drank the entirety of the wine, which we don't know if she has been doing before this, but at least in this moment.
We can figure probably, yeah.
He had to force her to drink the whole cup.
Yeah.
So I assume she's just been taking a few drinks here and there because
maybe
she had to throw up because she was actually gonna die from the level of stuff in her system, I thought.
Maybe.
I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But either way, that control that he had in that sort of way is gone because she doesn't care. This is survival now.
Yeah,
And it doesn't matter if you look crazy if you're trying to survive.
exactly.
And so I think that's what makes him really think like, oh, I underestimated her, because he thought that would still continue to work. And he hasn't met Althea Vestrit, and it doesn't.
So as I mentioned, he's looking at her and he sees the look of murder in her eyes, knowing it from his own look that he's seen in his own mirror multiple times. So he's ready for a fight to the death here, and he springs towards his crutch, but she springs towards the door instead. He saw her strike the opposite wall, catch herself, and then stagger up the companionway. The figurehead. She was trying to get to the figurehead. He got his crutch under his arm, caught at the table's edge, and pulled himself to his feet. She would get a surprise if she got as far as the foredeck. There would be no Vivacia to beseech for aid. He was tempted to let her go, but he could not have her ranting and raving to his crew. What if Wintrow or Etta heard her? So he reaches the door, looks out. Althea had slowed down a bit, and she was kind of stumbling on. And she's dressed in Wintrow's clothing, soiled now with spilled food and vomit. She must have awakened, dressed, then huddled there, waiting for him. Quite a plan for as much poppy as he had given her. He almost admired her. He'd have to increase the dosage. So this is kind of the picture I want to paint. We are outraged for Althea in this chapter, as we'll continue and read on and discuss. And I know we're in Kennit's head right now, but it gives us kind of a view of what Althea looks like to the rest of the crew. And I'm not trying to create excuses already for the other people's actions, but I want to set the scene to kind of get in their mindset, the other people's actions that we'll hop into, the other points of view. We have Kennit, who is their captain for the long time. He has been trustworthy. He has performed miracles, and people believe in him kind of like a god, or like he is destined truly to be the leader of us. So they believe him wholeheartedly. And he has been telling them, she is unstable. I'm the only one who can go into this room. I don't want her attacking you. I don't want anything, you know.
Right.
I'm the one only to do this. So he locks her in the room. And then to the crew, she escapes. She is disheveled and has vomit on her and food stains on her. And she is stumbling around and starts raving about things. Doesn't look good as like a first time impression of somebody. So Kennit is the one who is fully, like, he feels things are spiraling, but he still feels like he's in control.
He does have the upper hand in this scenario.
So that's why he was like, oh, it's okay if she goes to the figurehead. She's not going to get any support there, but I don't want her story coming back to Etta and Wintrow.
Right. And this is a detail I forgot. It is mentioned later in this chapter. But on top of all of that, Kennit has forbidden rape on his ships.
Yes.
That is a rule that he has made, that he has enforced supposedly up until this point. So there is a lot working against Althea. It's not just how she looks and what she, like, I mean, obviously we know she was drugged and also just went through the worst experience ever. So of course she's not in the best presentation.
Right. Yeah. You're not going to go out and like present logical arguments of, I don't know.
She doesn't have time to get dressed nicely and clean herself or whatever, you know, like we know that. But also you have to think about the fact that what the crew knows of Kennit and what they know of Althea are two very different things. And that isn't an excuse. It's not trying to be like, well, Althea should have done better. Like it's against her. The cards are against her.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to set up, right?
Yeah. It is not something that's Althea's fault or that she needs to be thinking about in this moment, but it does explain the response that we're getting from the crew and everybody else.
She's in a hostile environment and nothing is set up to go her way.
Right.
In this. So Kennit is kind of following her and seeing her stumble her way up. And then there's a silhouette of a crewmate standing in the doorway. And he's like, oh, thank goodness, you know.
Detain her, bring her back to her room. She is not well. She attacked me.
And then the figure steps in, and it's Wintrow. And Kennit sees his error there. Aunt Althea? He asked incredulously. He offered her a steadying arm, but she disdained him. He doubted that she recognized Wintrow. Instead, she lifted her arm to point a shaking hand at Kennit. He raped me. She flung her head back to peer at the lad through her draggled hair. And my ship is locked down deep in the dark. I'm drugged. I'm sick. Help me. Help her. Her words ran down with her strength. She sagged against the wall and slid down it while Wintrow stood transfixed in horror. Her head swayed like a poisoned cat's. To Kennet's dismay, another crewman had arrived. Then, worst of all, he heard Etta's voice behind him. What did that bitch say? She demanded furiously. Kennit turned quickly to face her. She's ill. She makes no sense. She attacked me. He shook his head. The loss of her companion seemed to have driven her mad. Etta's eyes went very wide. Kennit, you're bleeding, she exclaimed in horror. So his head is bleeding quite profusely. I mean, it's a head wound.
Yes.
And he's like, oh, no, it's nothing. I'll be fine. Wintrow, be cautious, but gentle with her. She doesn't know what she's saying. Watching Paragon burn has turned her mind. Althea, hearing all this, is like, no, I'm sane enough. You are a raping, murdering bastard. And her words were running together, and she thrashed about trying to stand. She's obviously super weakened from her ordeals and the drugs still in her system. And Wintrow is standing there extremely shocked. Just like, Aunt Althea, you need to rest. You've had quite a shock. He instantly believes Kennet's story here, and the appearance of Althea kind of raving is unnerving him.
Right. And I don't know. It's frustrating. It is really frustrating that he's like, whoa, you just need to rest. It's fine. Let's do what Kennit says when she's leveling these accusations. I think what makes me the most mad about this, because obviously, again, Althea isn't set up to win in this situation, right? Like, she's not really in a place where this is ever going to have gone well for her. But I was so disappointed in Wintrow's reaction, if only because I would expect Wintrow, of all of the people, to be able to understand that whether or not he believes what's going on, she seems to believe it. And maybe we shouldn't be trying to say, hey, let's do exactly what this guy you're accusing is telling you to do and put you back in a locked room that only he has access to. Maybe say, let's get you some air. Let's do some, like, I would expect him to at least try to bargain or argue. He always argues with Kennit. You know what I mean? Like, he always tries to find a better solution when it's clear that the one offered isn't right. And in this moment, his reaction is to side with Kennit, number one. Number two, try to coax her back into the place everything happened. And number three, have no guarantee that he'll ever even be able to see her again, or anybody else will either. Like, it just, that part is most frustrating to me. Like, I hate that he's putting her, basically telling her, get back in your cage in this moment, especially as somebody who has been where she's been in some ways, right? Like, with the way Kyle treated him, like, if he would have been able to get out of captivity and somebody's like, well, you just need to calm down. Just go back where you were just chained up.
It's your father. It's fine.
Just rest. It's fine. You think that would be a good reaction? No. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I know I'm expecting a lot out of him, but I'm so thoroughly disappointed the most with Wintrow.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, for him, we've talked about his character before and how he's kind of latched on to Kennit here and put his faith in Kennit, right? They're kind of synonymous at this point. He believes that Saw has put Kennit on Earth, I guess, for a purpose. And yeah, Kennit has some downsides to him, but he's doing good things.
Right.
So to believe this means that, one, Kennit has to be on purpose, like on Earth for a purpose that exceeds that anything else that he's doing, or it shakes the whole belief that Wintrow had in him to begin with.
Right.
So Wintrow, who, yes, he does argue with Kennit, I will say that, but it's usually in private. He usually doesn't do it in front of the crew. Unless it was about Vivacia, specifically.
Yeah. Well,
So I think this shock
This
and like
is also his family. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
why would he do it for the ship and not his aunt?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. So that's, I know I'm asking a lot. I know I'm not being fair to Wintrow. Like,
It's not necessarily that you're not fair to him. I think it's a reasonable response to what he is doing here, right? Because it is outrageous that he is doing that. However, since we are in all the heads of all these characters, I think we can view it from multiple different angles.
Yeah.
And still be outraged at his actions.
Right.
But try to come up with why he reacts the way he does, because it is very important to his character.
Yeah.
And really shows his thinking and where his loyalties have lain before.
Right. Well, I also...
Althea was nobody to him, really.
Right.
He went away really young when Althea was always at sea, came back, and then tried to comfort Althea because her grandfather died and he didn't really care about Ephraim, and Althea brushed him off. So he just knows her as like a distant relative.
Right.
And knows the name. So I don't think Wintrow ever saw her as close as Vivacia was, for example, to him. But he immediately defers to Kennit's answers and Kennit's story and helps her to stand and is just like, oh yeah, you do need to rest. Obviously, you're kind of crazy here and you need to just calm down, Althea.
Right. Well, we also know from later, because he explains his point of view later, that specifically her mention of the ship being locked away really unnerves him, because that's mostly why he thinks she's crazy.
Yeah.
Because he has given up on trying to get to Vivacia. He has given up on that connection that he has with the ship. He doesn't know Vivacia's still around. He thinks she's dead. So
yeah. He talks to Bolt about Vivacia and still like, hey, man, I know Vivacia's here, but it's like increasingly less common for him to do so now.
Right. And so I think like also that's working against her again.
Yeah.
Not her fault. She doesn't, I don't know.
It's against a stack deck for sure.
Yeah. So like that also is playing a part in his response here of like, oh, she's crazy. But like, they know she's been drugged, right? Like they know he's giving her poppy.
I don't know to what extent though. I think they do, but I don't know.
She can barely stand. She's staggering around. Her head is lolling on her feet. And they're all like, oh, she's just insane. And not like, oh, she's been severely drugged. And that also, okay, sorry. This whole chapter makes me so angry, because how do you see somebody acting like that and think, oh, it's just because she's been in confinement by herself too long, and not...
Because Kennit said so. Kennit said that she was severely injured, right? And he's like, oh, it's for her safety and for your safety. She might attack people. She was really injured. So I have to keep her in this confinement. So then when she escapes and she attacks people and she's acting kind of crazy, they're like, oh yeah, Kennit was right.
To be fair, she didn't attack anybody but Kennit.
Right, true.
She's not attacking it. She's saying, help me, please. This guy's crazy.
Yeah.
And they're all like, whoa, she's the crazy one. Like, that also makes me so angry.
It's so frustrating to read and so angering because it is real.
Right.
My mind in this, like, just looking at it from an overview, it just reminds me of, like, Jeffrey Dahmer. He had somebody in his captivity, and that man escaped his house, found policemen, and he was, like, naked and went up to him and he's like, hey, help me, this guy. And then the policeman just like turned to Jeff Dahmer and are just like, hey, you can take him back. He's like, oh yeah, he's just kind of like out of his mind. I'll take him back to my house. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And that guy was later found to be one of his victims, you know? Right. It's just horrifyingly real, the responses that people have, and so frustrating because of that.
Right. And yeah, I guess in that way, it's really about people's realities, right? Like Kennit said before he even went into the room, there is so much power in controlling people's realities.
Yeah.
And with Althea, he's doing it, or trying to do it, a lot more thoroughly than anyone else.
Yeah.
But in reality, he is still controlling the realities of his crew and Wintrow and Etta and all the people around him to believe that he's creating these miracles and doing all these things. But, it's obviously on a lesser scale than what he's doing to Althea. And so in this moment, the realities he has created for everyone else surrounding Althea is working in his favor, despite the fact that he's caught off guard and he doesn't have time to really think what to do next.
Mm-hmm. And Althea's is being helped up by Wintrow in this because she had slumped against the wall. And she's looking at him like he's an insect, and Kennit's observing that. Because in her mind right now, Wintrow is a traitor to her family and to her ship.
Right.
She went to save Vivacia. She sees Vivacia fully under Kennit's command, and Wintrow on board, not doing anything against him and not believing her. And Kennit does this to her. He's a full-on traitor, right? So she's showing her disgust for him and then immediately looks over at Kennit and then lurches towards him to attack him.
Well, not only that Kennit has full control of the ship and all of that, but also this is the first time she's realizing it even is Wintrow. And the first thing that he said to her when she's begging for his help
is to agree with him.
To agree with Kennit and say, get back in your cage. Like, that is the first thing he did, and they're related. Like, he knew that they were related. She didn't recognize him, but now with Kennit saying Wintrow, that's her nephew, Wintrow, who doesn't believe her, wants her to follow Kennit's orders, and is siding with Kennit. Like, it's worse than she could have ever imagined. But Kennit does make the observation that as Wintrow and Althea are standing face to face, they look like the old depictions of Saw, because they are basically the male and female version of each other. Besides the expressions that they are wearing, they are identical. And so
they were always depicted face to face on ancient coins he makes mention of.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting that we have the boy who loves Saw so much being compared to Saw.
So Althea turns away from Wintrow, lurches towards Kennit, and he's kind of getting ready to defend himself, but Etta springs in front. She was larger than Althea, physically alert and more experienced in fighting, so she takes Althea down pretty effortlessly, and Althea is struggling, but Etta holds her easily, saying, "Shut up. Shut your lying mouth. I don't know why Kennit bothered saving your useless life. Shut up or I'll break your teeth." Kennit's staring in horrified fascination. He had seen women fight before in Divvytown, but it was so common a sight as to be unremarkable, but he had always considered it a tawdry spectacle. Somehow this humiliated him. "Etta, get up. Wintrow, put Althea back in her room."
His whole like, oh, this is kind of embarrassing me that they're doing this. Like, dude, it's your actions that have caused this. Like, this is happening because of your actions. And you have the gall to be like, ugh, women.
I know.
I hate him. I hate him so much. It's ridiculous.
Althea gasped her words from beneath Etta's weight. "I'm a stupid bitch. He raped me here on my own family ship, and you, a woman, defend him?" And she stirs up wildly at Wintrow and then says, "He's buried our ship. How can you look at him and not know what he is? How can you be so stupid?" "Shut up, shut up." Etta's voice slid up the scale, cracking on hysteria. She slapped Althea an open-handed blow that rang in the confined companionway. "Etta, stop that, I said," Kennit cried in horror. He seized the whore's upraised hand by the wrist and tried to drag her off Althea. Instead, Etta only struck her with her other hand and then, to Kennit's complete mystification, burst into tears. Kennit lifted his eyes to find all the sailors kind of gathered around at him, staring in open-mouthed wonder at the spectacle. So he gives them commands to separate them, and finally, several men step forward to do that. Wintrow grabs Etta, and for a wonder, she did not fight him, but allowed him to hold her back. "Put Etta in my chamber until she calms herself. You others, put Althea back in her room and fasten the lock. I will deal with her later." So with her struggle against Etta, Althea's fight has kind of left her right now, and her strength has fled, and she promises Kennit on the way back, I will kill you.
And Kennit knows that she meant it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think, again, I'm probably being unfair to Wintrow, but in this moment, Wintrow helping Etta, I get it. Obviously, he knows Etta better than he knows Althea. He has a huge crush on Etta.
He was the first one to the
more.
pile, so he had to drag her off first.
Right. Like, he cares more. But, like, this whole chapter, time and time again, he continuously picks Etta.
Yeah.
And continuously puts Etta and then Kennit before anything else. It's Etta, Kennit, Vivacia, Althea. And then is surprised when Althea doesn't like him and doesn't want to listen to him and doesn't want to hear him out.
Right.
He doesn't care about her. He clearly doesn't care about her. And so, like, I don't know. I think this chapter brings me to a burning rage, and I get why Wintrow is choosing Etta. I don't want to pretend like, oh, why would he do that? Like, he's 16 and is in love with her.
Yeah.
He's worried about her. Yeah. But it just, like, I don't know. It's just so frustrating to watch everyone abandon Althea. She has nobody. And then he's upset that she doesn't trust him and is mean to him. And I just...
We'll get there.
We will get
there.
But, like, I think especially in this moment, like, he was supposed to help Althea and instead ends up comforting Etta, the woman who just attacked his aunt. Like, I don't know. It just blows my mind, honestly. But I also fully understand, like, it's not unrealistic. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. So he's sitting there, Kennit is, in the hallway, cleaning up his forehead. And when the men come back from locking up Althea, come back, he says, women, they simply do not belong aboard a ship, shaking his head conspiratorially and managing a wry grin. One crewman returned him a grin, but the others looked uneasy. That was not good. Was Etta that great a favorite with the crew? He'd have to do something about that. He'd have to do something about this whole situation. How had it become so untidy? And then a sailor rushes up and says, it's the ship, sir. The figurehead. She says she wants to see you, sir. She said, tell him right now. Now. No disrespect intended, sir, but that was how she spoke, sir. Did she? Well, you may tell her with no disrespect intended that the captain has another matter to tend to, but that he will be with her presently, at his earliest convenience. Sir, the man fumbled for a way to begin a desperate protest. Kennit speared him with a cold gaze. Yes, sir, he conceded. Kennit did not envy him his errand, but he doesn't envy himself his errand of having to confront Etta, but that's where he goes to next.
Right, well, because in his mind, he could scarcely let the ship see him with his bloodied head and food all over him, looking so disheveled.
And scarcely let the crew see him dash to a command that was not his own. He needs to be in charge of everything, right?
Right. And so as he's sitting there thinking, he smooths his mustache and says, slow, calm, steady. Take control of it again, he counseled himself. But a tiny voice spoke from his wrist, in a mocking counterpoint. Swiftly, messily, it all falls to pieces. In the end, dear sir, you will not even have control of yourself, no more than Ygritte did when he met his fate at your hands. For when you became the beast, little Kennit, you doomed yourself to share the beast's fate.
It's fate in your book?
Oh, sorry, the beast's end.
Oh, it's end. Okay. It's the same thing. I just was curious about word choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is... Kennit chose to become Ygritte in this. He didn't have to do that. He had multiple choices, but he chose to. So the charm is like, I'm gleefully watching your end here.
Yeah.
Because you deserve it. Anything that comes your way.
I'm also anti-charm at this point.
Yeah?
Because later, when Kennit is able to convince Vivacia and Bolt to believe his side versus Althea's, the charm says nothing and never clarifies and never sticks up for Althea. Here, charm was talking a big game. If you do anything to Althea, I'm going to tell Bolt.
Does nothing. Yeah.
Where is he now? Just mocking Kennit about, ooh, you're falling to pieces. Does nothing about it.
It could be because Bolt and Vivacia become one being and he doesn't have the same connection with the solidified being. Because later on in this chapter, Althea tries to get strength or connect with Vivacia and it's not there. So I'm wondering if becoming one being kind of separates that connection between Bolt and the Charm, because the Charm never spoke up about having that conversation or talking to Vivacia.
The Charm did touch Vivacia's consciousness though before Bolt was around. It could sense both of them.
Yeah.
And played with both of their consciousness, like their feeling of something being there.
Okay. But now that they're together, I don't know. That's my thought.
But also I feel we'll get to it later. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to argue about it.
So we switch over to Wintrow's point of view. And he's trying to comfort Etta here. Just saying, Etta, please. And he's thinking, like, I should be seeing to Althea. She had appeared both sick and deranged, but how could he leave Etta like this? Etta is sobbing. He had never seen anyone weep this way. There was a terrible violence to her gasping sobs, as if her body sought to purge herself of sorrow, but the misery went too deep for tears to assuage. Etta, please, Etta. She did not even seem to hear him, and timidly he pats her on the back and seems to recall people comforting each other when he was a kid that way.
Yeah,
so
his mom did that to Malta when she had one of her many tantrums, So
he like rubs the small of her back in circles, saying like, it's all over now, it's all over. It's all over, Etta confirms, and then broke into fresh mourning. It was so unlike Etta that it was like trying to comfort a stranger. Her behavior was as incomprehensible as Althea's. And then he thinks about that scene with Althea. It had been horrible. Something was deeply wrong with his aunt, and he had to speak with her regardless of what Kennit commanded. Her wild accusations of rape and strange talk of a buried ship stirred deep fears for her sanity. He should never have let Kennit prevent him from seeing her. The isolation had not rested her, but had left her alone with her grief. How could he have been so stupid? But Etta wept on, and he could not leave her like that. Why had Althea's crazed words affected Etta like this? Then the answer came to him. She was pregnant. Women always behaved strangely when they were pregnant. He felt almost giddy with relief. And then he says that, just cry it out. These emotional storms are to be expected in your condition. So, like, again, Wintrow is showing how much of a boy he is. Like you said, he's 15 or 16. He's not emotionally intelligent in this case. He doesn't know what to do.
He is the most emotionally intelligent of his family.
Yeah.
However,
he's also not experienced.
No. And it just like, obviously my Aunt Althea is going through something, but man, this crying woman
it's
I
grief,
like.
Right?
Yeah.
It's grief for Althea. It's not that her accusations are correct. It's like her sanity is slipping because she's
crazy. She's literally crazy.
She's in mourning, and the tragedy has torn her mind asunder. But I can't leave Etta.
Yeah, she's crying, and obviously because she's pregnant. Like, that's why she seems like a stranger to me. It's because she's pregnant. I love that Etta's response is to punch him in the face. She doesn't hit him. She just nicks the point his of his chin.
Yes. Clacking his teeth together and jolting stars into his eyes.
But I love that she turns around and is like, you're so dumb, and punches him in the face, because what do you mean? I don't condone violence. I don't think violence is ever the answer. These are people.
Fictional, characters.
I don't want that to come across as I'm like, whenever I'm upset and somebody misunderstands me, I punch them.
No. He says, what was that for? And she does say, for being stupid, for being blind, as they say only women are blind. You are an idiot, Wintrow Vestrit. I don't know why I ever wasted my time on you. You know so much, but you learn nothing at all. Nothing. Her face suddenly crumpled again. How could I have ever been so stupid? She's rocking back and forth. Sitting up, she reached for him. And hesitantly, he sat down and tried to pat her on the shoulder, but she comes into his arms instead and puts her face against his shoulder and sobs. Etta, my dear. He had never held a woman in his arms before. He dared to stroke her shining hair. And then the door opens and Kennit walks in, but he had nothing to be ashamed of. Wintrow convinces himself of that. He's like, I'm not going to let her go. I have nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing to be guilty about, nothing to feel guilty about. And he says to Kennit, Etta is not herself. Indeed, that may be a relief if whoever she is can behave better than the real Etta, brawling in the corridor like a common gutter snipe. I do hope I'm not interrupting you two. A small matter like my face bleeding or my clothes being filthy should not distress either of you. Etta slowly lifts her head. She looked at Kennit as if she had never seen him before. Something passed between them in that look, something Wintrow was not privy to. It seemed to break the woman, but she wept no more. I'm finished, she said brokenly. I'll get up and find... Don't bother. I can see to my own needs. Go to Jola instead. Tell him to signal Captain Sorkor to send a boat for you. I think it will be better if you stay aboard the Marietta for a time. Wintrow expects an outburst, but Etta just stands silent. She looked different. Slowly, he realized the change in her. Usually, when she looked at Kennit, her eyes shone and a glow of love suffused her. Now she stared at him, and it was as if her life were draining out of her. When she spoke, her capitulation was complete. You are right. Yes. That would be best. Then, without another glance, she leaves the room. So, I think we can talk a little bit about what Etta is going through right now. She does bring it up later and kind of brings it up to Wintrow, so we'll talk again about it there. But she sees the look and the truth that Althea has gone through and doesn't want to believe it. But she is confronted with it, and she has to talk to herself about the lie that she's been telling herself, that Kennit has been telling her.
Right.
And how she believed it, and yet she still loves him.
Yeah. And I think... So obviously, Etta believes Althea, although her response does not indicate that necessarily.
Right.
She is dealing with a lot, right? Like her safety is in peril here. She was taken out of a place where she was not favored. She was a sex worker, and then has now been elevated to Kennit's woman who he loved and cherished and wanted a baby with and was going to take care of, right? Like her life has completely changed, and she thought she was getting out of a situation that she was not wanting to be in, into this
that she was powerless in.
Yes. And now into this idyllic place where she gets to be herself. Somebody loves her. She's going to have a family. She gets to be violent and be a pirate, and that's not looked down on. And now she's faced with the fact that Kennit's kind of just like every other guy in Divvy Town. He's not some special saint that, you know, loves her and only her and wanted that family out of purity or whatever. Like, he is still just a man to her. And I don't want to say that and make anybody think that I'm saying that all men do this, but I think in Etta's point of view, this is
her
how men
experience
are.
with men, right?
Yeah. And so in her point of view, Kennit went from being this god-like creature, this amazing man, her partner, to just another man. And I think that's really hard, because that also makes her confront the fact that he probably doesn't love her the way that she thought that he did. And that there isn't like that idyllic version of him that she's had in her head of this man that cares about her and her feelings and her future probably doesn't exist.
Right. And yet that man still exists in her mind. She still has feelings for that man and for Kennit, who he truly is too.
Right. And I think, there's a lot of this sadness of she thought that this was something different, and now she has to confront that it is exactly.
It is over. Yeah. Everything's changed now.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so hard to talk about these moments without referencing what we learn later in the chapter. But specifically, I feel like it's hard for her because she does tell Wintrow later, right? Like, she herself has experienced this sort of violence. She knows people who have experienced it, especially in the house that she worked in. That's what happened. Like, it happened a lot. It was regular, unfortunately. And so as a woman, she cannot sit there and say, Althea's lying.
Right.
Like, and so I think that feeling of like, wow, I can't even pretend like it's a lie. Like, I just have to go forward knowing that that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really tough for her. And I think it could be bringing up her own stuff that she has to work through. Like, it's just really hard to tell. But obviously, this is hard for her. And she decides that she's going to stay.
Yeah.
This isn't.
Well, she's going to the ship, but she's staying.
But she's staying with Kennit.
Yes. And she walks out of the room for now.
And Wintrow's flabbergasted. He doesn't understand.
Yeah, he's trying to make sense of the whole situation. He's like, no, we can't send Etta away. I mean, he knows that Etta is pregnant, right? He cares deeply for Etta. We've talked about that. But he's trying to make the case to send Althea away. It'd be better for everybody, you know. Althea could then heal. Etta wouldn't have to leave. It all would go back to normal.
I'll pay for her passage in Divvy Town. Like, it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But Wintrow doesn't realize that
Kennit doesn't want that to happen.
No, not only that, but Kennit would never allow that to happen because Althea knows too much.
Right. What makes you think you have any say at all in what I do with Althea? She is mine, Wintrow, to do with as I will. Now fetch me a shirt. That is all I require of you just now. Not thinking, not deciding, not even begging. Fetch me a clean shirt and lay out trousers for me, and get me something to clean this cut. Without thinking about it, Wintrow moved to obey him. The anger coursing through him obliterated all thought. So he cleans up after some of the rags and gets the clothes for Kennit. And as he returned to the wash basin, he found control to speak again. Sir, this is not a good time for you to send Etta away. She should be here with you. I think not. I prefer Althea. I intend to keep her, Wintrow. You had best get used to the idea. Wintrow was aghast. Will you hold Althea here against her will while you banish Etta to Sorkor's ship? It will not be against her will if that is what upsets you. Your aunt has already indicated that she finds me a comely man. In time, she will come to accept her role beside me. Today's little incident was an aberration. She merely needs more time to rest and adapt to the changes in her life. You need not be troubled on her behalf. I will see her. I will speak. What was that? I heard nothing. Perhaps you should join Etta on board the Marietta until... It was his turn to stop in mid-sentence. His eyes widened. You felt it too. A struggle inside the ship herself. I felt no such thing. Something is happening, Wintrow declared. Bolt had taught him to dread his connection to the ship. He felt his link to her roiling with turmoil, yet he feared to reach toward her. I feel nothing, you imagine it. And then the call, Kennit! Kennit! It was long drawn out, threatening in its intensity. It is the ship screaming out for him.
Right. So, just like a quick, let me beat a dead horse quick. Wintrow in this moment is not fully that worried about Althea and Kennit's commentary towards she's mine, I'm going to do whatever I want with her.
He's aghast that he's going to hold her against her will.
Right. But he's more focused on trying to get Etta to stay on the ship. Right. Like, that's his main focus.
Wants to go back to normalcy.
Exactly. And so I think another thing that bothers me about Wintrow is he is standing there hearing Kennit say,
she's mine.
She's mine. I'll do whatever I want with her. Mm-hmm. I'm not letting her go. I'm going to keep her here. She likes me anyway. She told me she likes me. She'll learn to figure out her place eventually. Today's incident was bad. I'm sorry. You're hearing that and not having alarm bells or red flags waving around in your head.
Right.
Instead, he's just like, oh, but Etta's going to leave. I don't want Etta to leave. Bro, listen to what the man is saying about your aunt who just accused him. And like, think about the fact that doesn't exactly speak innocent to me.
Right.
That's not, I didn't do anything. That's, well, she likes me anyway, so it's fine.
Ugh.
And he doesn't care. He's not, well, okay, that's a little dramatic. He cares in some way, but he doesn't care in this moment because he's more worried about Etta and what's going to happen to her.
Yeah.
And so I think that, again, is, I just have, as part of my growing frustration with Wintrow and the choices that he makes in this chapter, because there are so many times when it's like, hey, there's something really bad happening. And he's like, yeah, but I love Etta and I kind of don't want to think about that right now.
Yeah, he's focused on the wrong things every time.
Yeah.
So that call draws Kennit out and he's trying to feign nonchalance. You're like, oh, I better go see what that is about. I'm sure the fracas in the corridor upset the ship.
But this time Wintrow can tell that it's feigned nonchalant.
Yes.
So
we have in Wintrow's head here him growing irate at Kennit, him not understanding why Kennit's making these decisions. So there's a little bit of cracks in that belief in Kennit here in this scene. And then when Kennit leaves, Wintrow follows him more slowly and he passes Althea's door and he thinks that the poor woman is talking to herself. Obviously, she's talking to the ship at this point.
He hears a low murmur of a voice speaking too fast to understand.
Yeah. Althea? He tried the door, but the lock on it was stout. He stood in a moment of indecision and then hastened after Kennit.
Once again, not choosing Althea.
Mm-hmm. He nearly reached the door when he meets Etta and he asks, "Are you all right?" "Of course not. Sorkor has a boat on its way. I must gather a few things." "Etta, I spoke to Kennit. I asked him not to send you away." She seemed to vanish in stillness. "I suppose you meant well by that." "Etta, you should tell him you're with child. It might change everything." "Change everything?" "Oh, Kennit has already changed everything, Wintrow. There is no need for me to add to it." "Etta, please, tell him."
Perhaps if Kennit, he says this in his mind, perhaps if Kennit knew that she was pregnant, he would not send her aside to claim Althea. Surely it would change his heart. What man could remain unmoved by such news? Which again shows his naivety and his youngness, right? Like, of course Kennit will keep you and care about the fact that he's about to have a baby.
And then he's going to set Althea aside, you know? So everything will be fine on both ends. Etta won't get sent away. Althea will get sent away.
Which
That's
is
good.
Crazy to me because in what world is that the type of person Kennit even pretends to be?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, yeah, like you said, he's young. He's trying to come up with that. It's that Vestrit romantic streak, right?
Yeah.
Trying to come up with the best case scenario and wholeheartedly believing it that this must be true because it can't go as wrong as it is going now.
Right.
And Etta's like, "Wintrow, you still don't understand, do you? Why do you think I was so shaken? Because I'm pregnant? Because she struck Kennit and made him bleed? I wanted to kill her. I wanted to do whatever I had to do to make her be silent because she was speaking the truth and I couldn't stand to hear it. Your aunt is not mad, Wintrow. At least, no more mad than any woman becomes after rape. She spoke the truth. You can't know that." His mouth was so dry he could scarcely form the words. Etta closed her eyes for an instant. "For women, there is an outrage that cannot be provoked in any other way. I looked at Althea Vestrit and I recognized it. I have seen it too often. I have felt it myself." He glanced at the locked door. The betrayal numbed him. Believing her hurt too much. He clung to doubt. But why didn't you confront him? So I want to stop right there before I finish the scene, but like that is what I was trying to get at the beginning. The betrayal numbed him and believing her hurt too much because he placed his whole religious system and hung that on Kennit's rightness. So his whole way of life, everything that he was brought up to be, he forced himself to accept Kennit because there was no way of getting around it. And the things that happened around Kennit made him believe that this was the right path to go, to try to find meaning in his life, his new life, and accept that. And when anything is shaking and he's like, no, it can't be like that. I can't have chosen wrong. Like, it hurts too much. I have to doubt. Like, there has to be doubt here.
Right.
Otherwise, my whole life sucks.
Yeah.
So he asks, why didn't you confront him?
Right. And I do. Okay. So before we get to that, also, I wanted to make the point. I don't particularly love the choice Hobb made to have Etta say, as a woman, I just know, like, another woman, like, there's just a certain type of rage you can only get if this thing happens to you, and I recognize it. I feel like that's not a great thought to process to have, like, because, I mean, obviously, there is no way to tell if you weren't there, right? Like, and I feel like saying, oh, as a woman, we just know. Because women don't know.
It's not just some mystical gendered connection, you know?
Yeah. And like, I think that especially is harmful because a lot of times it's women who are against other women coming forward, right?
Yeah. They're 50% of the population. Some of them are bound not to believe, you know?
Exactly. And I think like saying, you know, like it's just, there's just a certain way that you act after it happens that makes it so that anybody else who had that happen to them could never doubt you. Also problematic because obviously everyone reacts differently. There's no one way to react to that thing happening to you. And so I think it's dangerous to say like, you just know when somebody's not lying. However, I also recognize this is a book, this is fictional, and it is a really nice way to make it so that Etta fully believes, is sympathetic in some ways, and also
hates the reality.
Like I understand at some point, but I did want to comment that I think it is a dangerous plot to put out there in a way, because I don't, if this is somebody's first time having to grapple with sexual assault and they're like reading the book through this, I don't want them to be like, oh, well, then we just have to ask somebody else who got raped and then they can tell us if it's true or not.
Right.
Like it doesn't work like that. And we should believe people.
Headcanon, maybe this will make you feel better about reading it, is that since Etta went through so much in such a short time with her emotions and her thoughts, she can't articulate herself well.
Right.
But that just like, oh, there's a connection is kind of based on like piecing together logical things of like, there's no reason. She was already upset, you know, by Kennit keeping her away.
Right.
Saying like, it doesn't make sense saying that she's too dangerous, but also that she's drugged up. Like, it doesn't make sense there. There's already these incongruities, her being jealous that Kennit's spending too much time with her. There's already inklings of doubt. So then she goes into this corridor, and with these accusations and with somebody so weakened and with rage and leveling those accusations, there's some sort of belief going to be there or doubt in her mind. So articulating that isn't super easy to do at this time. So maybe that could be a headcanon. Like she pieced it together in her mind through all of these hints, but just has to say that there's a rage because...
Right. Well, I also think of it too, to try and make it less bad. She does think Wintrow is so slow and kind of dumb and is trying to explain it in a way that he will understand.
Well, again, because we just talked about this, he has willful ignorance trying not to believe this.
Right. He's like actively been like, whoa, this is crazy. This way. Yeah, she's crazy. And she's like, dude, I just know. Magic told me. I don't know. Yeah. Like, it's real. Like, so I want to believe that is why it's said that way.
But you're saying as a prominent plot point and the only way it's presented, it could potentially be harmful to somebody who has not experienced that in real life and is taking a book as gospel about how it actually works.
Yes, because this is a really realistic depiction, right? And I think this is the hard part about writing about sexual assault in a realistic way, right? Is that first of all, it's hard to read if you've gone through it, and second of all, it's hard to read even if you haven't. I'm not going to say it'd be easy for anybody, but like, it's such a nuanced thing that it's so hard to fully do this in a perfect
comprehensive way. Yeah.
There's no way to do that. I don't think
there's actual, academic studies that can't comprehensively cover everything.
Exactly. And so am I holding Hobb to an unfair standard in this moment? Yes, absolutely I am. But I don't think she's a bad person. I don't think she's a bad writer because of it. I just personally feel the need to say, hey, this isn't great. And we should also acknowledge that like women don't have a magical ability to tell when a victim's telling the truth.
And women are not a monolith. They react differently.
Yes. I would feel like a bad person for not pointing that out and just like letting it go. So
good to say. Yeah. So Etta here is trying to get it through Wintrow's head. I have told you, Wintrow, I didn't confront him because hearing the truth was bad enough. I don't want to live it. She doesn't want to hear it from Kennit's mouth at all. Kennit is right. It is best that I stay on Marietta for a time. Until what? She shrugged one shoulder stiffly. The gleam of tears sprang into her eyes again. Her voice was tight as she said very quietly, "He may weary of her. He may want me back. I have to gather my things."
I do really feel bad for Etta. Obviously, don't approve of how she reacted, but I do feel for her because she is somebody who has had to fight to survive her whole life, and she finally gets stability, and it's taken away again.
A short year, you know?
Yeah. And so I do feel really bad for her. I think this is a really tough situation, and it is really heartbreaking for her to say, you know, the only way I get to come back is if he gets tired of Althea.
Yeah.
And that might not happen. It might not, because, I mean, realistically, I'm sure she realizes the difference in their stations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Althea is a lady, for lack of better terms, and she is not. And so she recognizes that that's closer to probably what Kennit wanted anyway. And why would he choose her over Althea? There's probably a ton of doubts swirling in her mind. And also, I love that she tells Wintrow, you know, like, sure, I believe it to be true. I don't need Kennit to give me the details. I don't need to hear it out of Kennit's mouth for it to be real. Also, probably doesn't want to hear him deny it.
Yeah.
Because that almost might be worse, you know, like it just is all bad and she might as well go away and pretend like it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate because not super supportive of another woman who is in distress, but she's not exactly in a position to be able to help anyway.
Right.
So, yeah, all bad.
Before we move on to the next point of view, I think we'll end it there. This is a fairly long chapter. There's a lot of point of view switches, and I think we've talked a lot about this so far, and we still need to talk more about it.
Yeah, I think it's just such a content dense.
Yeah.
It's not only a long chapter, but we both also have a lot to say about it. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so thank you for tuning in so far. If you have thoughts on I guess the acuity of Malkin and She Who Remembers, thinking of like, hey, we need to wake up this other person.
Yeah.
Or if you have thoughts on Kennit or Wintrow's naivety and how young he is, please let us know. You can message us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can message us on any of our social medias or comment on any of our posts at isfitzhappy at Facebook, Instagram. I always want to say Twitter, but we're not there anymore. We're on YouTube, Reddit, Blue Sky, and Threads. So please let us know what you're thinking. Talk to us about what you think and what you feel about Etta, Althea's situation here, and Wintrow and Kennit's points of view.
Right. We'll get back into it next week. All right. Now we get to do our favorite part of the podcast where we talk about what you've brought to us. So this week we have a new listener write in, and it is from listener Kristen, and they are writing in all the way from New Zealand, which is pretty cool. Pretty close to us, right? All the way.
A short little flight from us.
Yes. Still cool. And they are not fully on to where we are now. They're actually on episode 100, which is the end of the first trilogy.
Or near it.
Near the end of the first trilogy, which is kind of crazy to think about. Mm-hmm. It only took 100 episodes for those 3 books, and we're, 130 something in, and we are not there yet. So thank you, Kristen, for writing in. And they brought up some really interesting things that we wanted to discuss.
Yeah. And it's been so long since we've done this. We're not sure if we've talked about all of them before, but they are interesting thoughts nonetheless. So if we have, apologize, but we're going to talk about them again.
So first and foremost, Kristen wrote in to talk about
skill in the skill pillars.
Yes, a skill in the skill pillars, and how we sort of had a theory that the reason that the
peoples of the Six Duchies, and particularly the Farseers.
Yeah, exactly. The Farseers, people of the Six Duchies, all of that. They're more skill able because they're living so close to the skill pillars. That was one of the theories we had, that like maybe it's something to deal with how closely they lived to skill stones.
Yeah, the skill in general, and
Yes.
kind of that essence kind of leaking. You know, the point that Robin Hobb brings up a lot in these books that I've talked about, how if you're near something, your essences kind of mingle a bit.
Yes.
I think that was part of our discussion of
Right.
just how you're living around these skill objects so long that maybe that's one of the points. I think we got off that theory and talked more
Yes.
about how the Elderlings maybe fled to that area, and that's why the bloodlines, when the Out Islanders and Six Duchies people intermingle, there's more skill because it's Elderling related. But this might have been one of the early theories that we talked about.
Yes. So we talked about that, and Kristen was wondering if maybe that could be, if that theory is true, if that could be why Regal isn't as skilled as his siblings, because he didn't spend very much time in Buckkeep, where there's all this skill around it.
He was always in Tradeford when he was young.
Yeah.
Which is a very interesting thought. I always put it down when I was reading it to him just being sickly and his mother not wanting to put him into skill classes, but I don't know why, because Galen was a part of that. So wouldn't she want him to have like this regal ability, like this royal ability that is known as the royal thing, because he is so farseer? Wouldn't she want him to be super skilled?
But if she doesn't understand what that is, it could be misconstrued.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is a really interesting thing to think about. The fact that Regal isn't as skilled as his siblings.
Right. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, with the remarks that Regal has more farseer blood than the other two children, might be marks against him for how much skill he has, because we talked about how skill seems to become from the blending of Out Island blood and not. So if Regal is close to a purebred farseer or something like that, maybe there's not a lot of outside blood getting into his bloodline, so he's not as strongly skilled because it's not mingling.
Right. Definitely. So I don't know. I just thought it was a really cool theory that, like, if it is based on proximity to all these skill stones that are in Buckkeep, then it would make sense. I love it. Although we do know Regal does have some capacity in the skill, because he can ride with other people's consciousness.
Yeah, but it's very, very unclear in the last book how much that is Will taking him on and doing something, and how much that is Regal being able to do that.
True.
Because he is described kind of like a parasite, leeching Will's strength away.
Right.
And we don't know if that's Regal's own ability, or Will is so under the influence of Regal that he does that to himself.
Right.
So it's really hard to tell, I think.
It is.
But that is a very interesting discussion about why Regal is so less skilled than the other Farseer boys.
Something we haven't thought about in a while, so we thought it'd be fun to bring up. Another thing we hadn't thought about in a while is Verity's dragon carving.
Yeah.
So Kristen brought to our attention that when Verity is carving his dragon, it is sort of like
it's foreshadowing.
Yeah, it's sort of a little foreshadow into Fitz's future.
Right. And the way that, so I found this really interesting, because the way that Robin Hobb writes is kind of like, there's a lot of different analogies for it, but it's kind of like a discovery writer, you might call it, instead of like an architect or a planner or an outliner. The way that she talks about it is that she has the characters do what they would do in a situation, you know? They just get into there, and because she just follows the characters' whims, as opposed to planning out all of the big plot points or the plot beats. So there isn't really a way that she would have foreshadowed it, but it mirrors it so perfectly that it is foreshadowing when Fitz carves his dragon. So maybe it is just kind of like inevitable that's how the story would end up, and she maybe had an idea even back then. Because I don't even know if she knew she was going to write more books.
I think it really goes to show that, like, a writer, like, it is all coming from their mind, right? Like, and your mind is going to self-referentiate because that's something that you thought up, right? So I don't know. I think it's really cool how that can happen naturally. Whether or not it's natural, we don't know. But it is, as readers with the whole book series, it is foreshadowing. And I don't think we touched on that at all.
Right.
So that's a good shout.
There's also something that Kristen asks here, and that's, how did Verity know how to carve a dragon? How did Verity get the knowledge to do what he is doing? Which is a very good question.
Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about that. Again, we might have, but we're going to discuss it briefly again.
Well, that was over 100 episodes ago, so
Yeah.
I think it's okay. We're not beating a dead horse here.
And how do you think so? How do you think he found out?
I think he spent time in the city.
Yeah.
I think from his time in Kelsingra, he was able to sort of, you know, really dig deep and find memories and find information. And
I'm
we
with you
also
on that.
we also know that there are the skill cubes that hold information, kind of like a scroll would. Maybe he found a skill cube that made sense. We know he was camping up in that tower that is near the room with all the skill cubes.
Yeah, the map room.
Yes.
Well, the skill cubes that they find, mostly, at least that Fitz and Jade do, are in his Liveship.
Oh,
There's a lot of
fair
scrolls
enough.
there and knowledge cubes and stuff.
But
there
I
might be
assume
stuff.
there would have been more, because we know there's a scroll room up in that tower because Fitz goes into it, and it's
a lot
mostly
of it's
like
unreadable.
Yeah, but who's to say there weren't skill cubes that Verity took? You know what I mean? So
Exactly. Yeah, that's my thought too, is that he just kind of gained the knowledge from memories while in the city, because how else is he going to do something like that? However, he would have also passed the garden of statues, the stone garden, and seen those carvings. And maybe he would have, because he is more strongly skilled than Fitz by a lot, he might have felt some of the connections that Fitz did,
right,
and could have put two and two together, because if you get to the quarry, you can see the half carved things as well.
And if we think about it, Verity was actually trained by a real skill user.
Yes.
He was the last person.
Now the
Galen
training,
as well, I suppose, but
Galen was truly the last one, because Verity wasn't fully trained, right? Because Solicity died before they could complete their training, Chivalry and Verity.
Right.
So Galen took over and then soon said, like, oh, you've learned enough.
Right.
So they might have gotten there, but they
And-
weren't complete in their knowledge. And that's why I think Verity didn't know what was there to begin with.
Right. But I also think that, I mean, Kettle knew what to do.
Right.
Kettle knew all about carving dragons. That is a thing that people did. Granted, she's like, what, 300, 400 years old?
I think like 250, yeah, something like that.
So a little different, but it seems as though it was a tradition that people still tried to do in her time, which isn't as far away as, say, you know, Dutiful's time. So I don't know, maybe he got taught by the actual skill users that's like
Could have been
the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But good thoughts again there, just to think about that.
And then also we have another Molly and Fitz lover.
Yeah, a supporter of the pairing at least.
Welcome to the cool side of the team.
And also Kristen does like Starling, because
hot take.
Yeah, because they are a music school, a preschool music teacher as well. So likes kind of the bard association there.
But also feels that Starling did the best she could with the cards she was dealt.
Yeah, yeah. And
which is fair.
We've had both sides of the conversation on our podcast, I think.
Yeah, I think it's hard with Starling because morally, I don't agree with what we find out about her next book.
Yeah.
How she keeps sleeping with Fitz despite having a husband. Don't love that. Can't get behind that. I also think she's too invested in making a story and doesn't care enough about the fact that other people have feelings and lives.
Right.
She feels very like everybody else is an NPC to me.
But she is sympathetic.
She is sympathetic, and I like her as a character, so I get it.
Yeah.
I do think she was doing the best she could. Still don't love her, but, you know, to each their own.
And finally, Kristen also sent us some pictures of her pets. So thank you so, so much. They're adorable.
Good pets. We love to see them.
And I hope your dog did not suffer any ill effects from eating window putty.
Oh. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you to everybody else who writes in. We always enjoy hearing from you guys and learning new theories. So we look forward to hearing from you guys next week.